Today I wanted to talk about the biggest things impacting your metabolism and the things that you can do to help improve that. So when I first got started in kind of the bodybuilding nutrition world, no matter what diet I gave somebody, they were losing weight. They were young, healthy individuals, and it seemed super easy until I got to outpatient clinic and I started giving people diets to help with their weight loss. And I quickly realized that the same things that I did for these athletes were not working with these people, these everyday people that maybe weren't as healthy. So what are the things that will drive a metabolism to run slower than it should? You know, you may think, well, I'm getting older. Well, that may have some impact, but not as big of an impact as the things that we're going to talk about today. So what's the thing that I always look for, and that's something that you can see on blood work that might indicate that you may have this problem? Well, if you've ever gotten your thyroid checked, they've probably checked your TSH. Well, if that number is below 1.8, then that is a functionally depressed thyroid indicator. Now, typically in a hypothyroid patient, that number should elevate. If it is because of the most common cause of a low thyroid, Hashimoto's disease, or any other thyroid disease for that matter, the TSH should respond in an upward direction, pushing on the gas pedal, so to speak, to increase the speed of the thyroid. Well, in the case of somebody's thyroid that is actually not pushing on the gas like it should, you need to address, most commonly, either a high stress hormone problem or a high inflammation problem. 99% of the time, it's one of those two. And at the root of those things, we'll talk about the things you can do to address those two drivers of a, in this case, low functional thyroid problem or a decreased metabolism because of stress hormones and inflammatory reasons. The first thing you want to look at is blood sugar. You should have a stable blood sugar, a stable environment for your body when it comes to providing energy to every cell in your body. So whether you have low blood sugar, which in our case, we're looking at functional numbers that's below 85, then that needs to be addressed. If your number is above 100 fasting glucose, then that needs to be addressed. You address them in two different ways. And in a lot of ways, they're polar opposites, so you need to know one or the other. If you are below 85, here's your solution. You need to eat 3 well-rounded meals, good protein, good fat. You're gonna wanna get at least your lean body weight in grams of protein by the end of the day. No snacking. Those 3 meals, 5 hours apart. Again, no snacking. You need to, by the time you get to lunch, be full and not feel like you need to eat lunch, but you're going to eat it anyways. If you are starving by lunch, you didn't do a good enough job for breakfast. Most important is breakfast for these people. So good fat, good protein. You want probably at least 20 to 30 grams of protein and fat in every meal, if not a little more depending on your shape and size. So that's the number one thing you want to do with low blood sugar. Most of the time, just doing that is going to have a big impact. You correct that 85, bring it up above 85, that is, then you're going to see some differences pretty immediately. Okay, so in the other case, you're looking at a high glucose number. In order to resolve diabetes or insulin resistance, you need to empty the cell of glucose. Now, you can do this in a few different ways. One, you can exercise. Exercise is good for this person. High intensity exercise. Basically, you just want to keep moving, and you want to move more every day. You don't want to just go on a 20-minute walk every day for the rest of your life. Not that that's not healthy, it's just you do need to create some demand. You need to squeeze the glucose out of those cells. I like high intensity exercise for this. I think it's helpful. But choose what you can do. If you are in a very overweight category and you need to be cautious about doing high impact stuff, then of course get in the pool. Anything getting your heart rate up is going to be helpful here. So exercise is important, and then reducing sugar, obviously. I mean, you know the things to do. Cut out carbs. One way of reducing glucose in the cells just to stop taking it in, you could consider intermittent fasting would be a good option for improving insulin sensitivity. Also consider using supplements like berberine, lipoic acid, or chromium. Okay. After we look at blood sugar, we're going to look at the next category of things, which is inflammation. Now, inflammation can be a little bit more complicated because it's going to vary depending on persons. Your immune system can react to anything and create an inflammatory response. You look at an anti-inflammatory diet, it may be inflammatory for one person but not another person. There are some foods that I'm going to go ahead and recommend you cut because they do show up a lot with different people. So, number 1, sugar. Number 2, gluten. Number 3, dairy. You may not have issues with those foods. Some people are lucky enough to know that they do have issues with those foods. Either they have a food sensitivity test, which you can argue how reliable those are, or you get headaches after you eat gluten. Well, there's your, here's your sign. So you should be avoiding those. If you just want to take a shotgun approach and you kind of want to take out the biggest offenders, those are the 3 that I would recommend you try and take out if you're trying to get some big impact here. So trying to reduce inflammation, that is. So number 2 is, aside from removing triggers of inflammation, you need to resolve and prevent inflammatory accelerators. So what are those? Those are things that accelerate inflammatory processes. That would be things like insulin. So insulin is something that we're going to be resolving by taking care of our blood sugar issues, so don't worry about that. We already talked about it. Excessive amounts of aspirin or NSAIDs, believe it or not, those can perpetuate an inflammatory response, leading to a leukotriene toxicity. Don't need to know all the details, but essentially don't live off aspirin. Find ways to resolve your issues other ways. So stress hormones also induce an inflammatory response, so reducing stress hormones are important. We'll talk about that in a little bit on the things I recommend to help reduce stress hormones. Lastly, when it comes to reducing inflammation, what you can look at is supporting the reduction of inflammation, making sure you have enough magnesium, zinc, B6, or fish oil in your diet, good omega-3s. You can always consider turmeric, resveratrol, things like that, also to help with inflammatory issues. All right, the last thing we're going to talk about is stress hormones. And we talked about many of the things that will drive a stress hormone issue anyways. So just working on the previous things that we mentioned is going to have a big impact. Additionally, when you have a stress hormone response, now everybody's familiar with the emotional response that drives stress hormones. So that's something that's hard to control. Your low blood sugar that's driving an increased amount of cortisol is something that's very easily controlled. So making sure that you eat breakfast. So if you can focus on controlling what you can control, then a lot of times the things you can't control become more manageable. So whether you have anxiety, depression, or any of those things that amplify these stress hormone responses, definitely focus on the whole blood sugar thing, removing inflammatory triggers, things like that can make a big deal. If you do have gut issues, I've done tons of videos on that. You need to resolve those too. That's like a little inflammatory factory going on. Inflammation drives stress hormones. So that's a chemical driver of stress hormones. So chemical, you've got inflammation and blood sugar. Physical, you've got pain, chronic pain. You need to get it resolved. Work with somebody that knows what they're doing when it comes to that. Don't just let it go. So, and then mental, obviously, that's something we've talked about as well. So if you work on resolving all of these things that we talked about, you see definitely an improvement in that TSH number. If it is low, that's usually what I see. And then you're going to feel better, you're going to look better, and you're going to get everything resolved. So it's one of those things where calories in versus calories out. Yes, it is true to an extent, but the amount of calories that you burn is variable day to day and from person to person. Whether you are the same weight and height as somebody or not, it doesn't always work out to those TDEE calculations like it should, unfortunately. I wish it did, because it was really easy back when all I had to do was worry about that. So if you have any questions specifically, reach out to me directly, doc@drtoddanderson.com. I'm available there. You can actually sign up for an initial consult. It's 20 minutes, it's free. and we can do a one-on-one talk anytime you want. If you found this video was helpful, hit the like, subscribe, turn notification bells on if you really liked it. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next one.